Hey, Hila, welcome back to school. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much.
So it's so fantastic to have a fellow Israeli on the show. It's a rare chance. I don't get many of those, and when it happens, it truly makes me happy. So thanks for being here.
I'm very excited to be here too, Yaniv.
So maybe we start with a little context. Could you tell the audience, our listeners, who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Hila Cohen. I'm head of business development and the chief of staff of the WFP Innovation Accelerator. WFP is a United Nations agency. Our full name is the World Food Program. We operate in more than 80 countries around the world, serving people suffering from hunger due to climate shocks and conflict. And we are a very operational organization. We have 18,000 employees around the world, really dealing on a daily basis with some of the most complex situations that you can imagine.
Yeah.
And the WFP Innovation Accelerator was founded 5 years ago in Munich, Germany, but we are in a global accelerator with a global reach with a number of local hubs as well.
That's fantastic. And you guys won the Nobel Prize recently, right?
Yes, we won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay.
It was a very special moment for the whole organization. And I think it's not only important for our organization as a humanitarian organization, but I think it brings a lot of focus on the topic of global hunger. So we're very happy that it gets this global attention at this stage.
That's incredible. And I'm sure that as an Israeli, the Jewish moms were pretty proud of you, right? For being part of an organization that wins the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, I think it's a pride for both my parents, I have to say. It's actually my dad who called me to tell me about it. He usually doesn't call me in the middle of the day. So I thought it was actually a family emergency when I heard about it, or when he called me, and then he told me that he heard we won the Nobel. And in the beginning, I wasn't sure if he was serious because he has quite a good humor, my dad. But he actually meant it. And I was actually in a Zoom meeting with my HR colleague, Katrin, and I had to unmute the call and say, Catherine, we won the Nobel. It was a very exciting moment. So that was on the personal level, was very exciting. And at the organizational level, I think I've been with WFP for 8 years. So for people across the organization, it was so much pride and so much excitement for the recognition, especially for my colleagues who work in field locations and very tough locations on a daily basis. So I'm very happy with this very special moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely an amazing accomplishment. So mazel tov.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering, did it change you? Did it change like you as a person and what you do, or maybe did it change the organization? Because it's a pretty big win.
I don't think it changed me. I think what it actually did was more of my friends now understand or heard about the organization I work for. People don't always associate the WFP. Well, they don't hear the United Nations World Food Program. So also in Israel, but in other locations as well. So it's great that the cause of WFP, as it links to zero hunger, of ending that big problem by the end of 2030, got the global stage. But also the rest of the sustainable development goals got much more attention, I think, due to this, to the Nobel Peace Prize. So I think the change is more that the world knows more about us. Yeah. I think many people already know, but it just opened it to new audiences. So I think that's the change. But I've always been proud to work for WFP. So it's just an added element to be proud of. Yeah.
It increased the cool factor, the coolness factor.
Yeah.
which is important. I mean, yeah, we all need that these days. So let's talk a little bit about the WFP. You talked a little bit about what it is, but I'm curious to know more about the accelerator. Like, I didn't know that you guys even had an accelerator. What is it? Could you share some more details about it?
Sure. So the goal of the WFP Innovation Accelerator is to sort, support, and scale global innovations to disrupt global hunger. And what that means is that we as a large organization realized a few years ago that there's a lot of innovations within our organization. So our colleagues on the ground seeing daily problems, they had ideas of how to solve them in an innovative manner. And also we realized that there is an external ecosystem of startups and companies, NGOs and academia that also want to try to find solution to the biggest problems on the planet. So we decided to create an accelerator that looks for those solutions based on problems, statements that we create, or just problems that we see on the ground. And in addition, we wanted to create a facility or a structure that could work with our internal employees and also with with startups and other external entities. And what we've created is a certain type of bridge, because on one side, we understand the language of startups. We know what an MVP is. We know what they're trying, different rounds of funding that they want, or, we understand what are their motivations, what are their challenges when they work in developing countries. And on the other side, we also really understand the realities of on the ground in the locations where WFP operates. And I think that is, let's say, what we can offer to startups. That's our, let's say, value add to startups, is bridging both these worlds, because sometimes it's complex for a startup that wants to do good. And on the other side, for a WFP colleague, they might not know what is human-centered design, or why do you focus on the user so much? So sometimes I feel our role is like a translator. And so we bring know-how to the teams from WFP, from the private sector, and they can come to our boot camps, and we can also give funding to run pilots with WFP. So I think that's, we have a certain value add that we've honed over the last 5 years.
Yeah. And you mentioned these locations that you work across. What are they? Where do you guys operate?
So the World Food Program operates in 88 countries around the world, predominantly in locations such as Southeast Asia, Africa, and South America. We also have some operations in the Middle East and the Caribbean. So we're very, very global.
That's incredible. So I've got a ton of questions now. First of all, how do you sort of maintain, I guess, the performance across all these, all these different regions? Like, how do you maintain your quality, right? The quality of service that you provide.
So I have to say that we started in a very humble way 5 years ago. So the full portfolio of activities that we provide today weren't like that in day one. And I think the focus and then the intention in the beginning actually strengthened our program, so it's much stronger today. Because we started with a program where we were sourcing innovations, running innovation boot camps. Initially, until March, it was in-person boot camps, and now we do them virtually. And then we had a sprint program where we fund startups, giving them up to $100,000 to run a pilot with the World Food Program in a field location. And we also provide mentoring and other elements during that phase. And I think what those humble beginnings enabled us to understand what we're good at, what we want to focus on, and what the startups need. And we had different learnings on the way, what we assumed was more important or was less important. And then we were able with time to add additional elements. Like today, we have a big focus on frontier innovation. So what does the future look like for the humanitarian work? But we also learned that scaling just doesn't happen automatically, and that you need to put intent into scaling innovations in developing countries. So that's something we also added about a year or a year and a half ago. So it's we have a very strong core that gets, let's say, it grows or adapts based on our learnings.
So I think that's incredible, because you guys embody basically the type of mindset that you want to support. Like, you were a startup when you started, right? And you created an MVP, and it was rugged and rough and scrappy. And then you built up on top of that, added features as you went, based on, and you mentioned this human-centered design approach based on what your quote unquote clients needed, right?
Yes. And our clients are both, to me, the clients are the startups or the teams that are external to us, and we need to understand what they need. Our clients are, and the users are the internal WFP teams that also have a lot of knowledge that is also valuable when you innovate. And our clients are also the WFP country offices and the beneficiaries for whom we're solving problems. So it's not about what, let's say, I as Hila think is most important, but it's always seeing, is the innovation that we're creating actually helping our country office to better serve the people that WFP focuses on? And I think that is always on our mind. And with COVID, it's sometimes a bit more complex, but it's still always on our mind how we create, let's say, the best experience and the most robust and relevant information for teams in person or in a virtual reality right now.
It sounds like a really intricate system of, I guess, right? The intricate system to kind of balance all these different stakeholders. How do you, I'm curious, like, about your typical day or maybe a non-typical day, like, how do you do that? And how does it work? Maybe we could give the audience a bit of a, sort of a peek under the hood, if you will.
Yeah. So I think the typical day depends on your role in the team. I have a more, let's say, cross-cutting role across the team, also as a chief of staff. So I look into topics. My morning can start with certain HR or recruiting topics. Then we move on to procurement topics, and just to understand how do we work with a startup, or maybe we have some legal issues to look into. Then sometimes it's to look about what's our planning for 2021, because now with COVID reality, are we going to continue to do virtual boot camps? What does that mean? How do our pitch events look like? We're now doing, for example, our next boot camp is in collaboration with a new regional bureau that we're a regional innovation hub that we're opening in Nairobi. So we're coordinating with them. How do we create a strong experience that highlights our work in East Africa together with other startups from around the world? And then it might my day might end with helping a certain team on a mentoring question. So my days are quite change on a day to day. And when you work also in a large organization, I think this is important. Like when you innovate in a large organization, I think you also need to manage all kinds of different relationships and processes internally. Sometimes you change the processes internally, so you need to give inputs to that. So really, my days are very varied. I think that's the exciting part of my job, but it's also sometimes, it's just it requires creativity. Yeah,
for sure. So I'm kind of curious about the people that work within the accelerator, because you mentioned creativity. I'm imagining people, with Post-its, kind of super creative, brainstorming sessions, things like that. Is that what it is, or is it something different, or a combination of?
I think it's a mix. I really, my mantra, and my team knows this, is that to make innovation impactful, you actually need to know how to implement it and see how you create results on the ground. So I think the work doesn't stop at the Post-its. I think it's sometimes, I think it's actually how you actually bring it into reality is actually the tougher part. So in that sense, I think it's a mix. And I think in big organizations, whether it's a UN agency or any other big organization, or I think even in a small accelerator, you actually need to think about how do you translate your ideas into reality. So I think there's a lot of thought put into that. In our team, just I can tell you, we're very proud. Today, we're a team of around 50 people from 30 nationalities. But the diversity is also about the backgrounds of people. And I think in a team like ours, you need that. We have people with experience in humanitarian and development work. We have people with experience in design thinking or working with NGOs or ex-entrepreneurs or ex-consultants. Some of also you need some really good operational people. So you need to have a solid procurement team, a solid partnerships team. So it's a really, I think the beauty of our team is that there's so many different types of ways of approaching problems. So some people might come from a more design thinking point of view. Some people will come from, let's say, a bit more a pragmatic point of view. Some people will come with different like process questions because we're part of a big organization. So it's an ongoing conversation, and we always need to find, within our organization, where do we feel comfortable to be uncomfortable? Yeah.
Right. I think that's amazing. That's kind of the design thinking dream come true, right? Being very inclusive, having people from different backgrounds and sharing their different perspectives, and kind of creating a really interdisciplinary type of a team. So that's incredible. You said two things I wanna touch on, and it kind of moves us, I guess, to sort of this next set of questions that I have for you. You said impact, right? And you said operational, like getting stuff done. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I couldn't agree with you more. There are too many people spending time on Post-its and less doing stuff on the ground. So how do you actually translate the Post-its to on-the-ground work, especially, in an organization with 88 different locations? That's one question. And the other one is, let's talk a little bit about impact, and how do you measure impact for your organizations and different stakeholders that you have?
So the actually interesting part about the impact, it actually starts in the sourcing phase. So we run challenges that are public, that anyone can apply to on our website in innovation.wfp.org. It's open to our internal colleagues, but also to startups, NGOs, academia from around the world. And what's interesting is that we, for our accelerator program, we actually look at impact actually from the sourcing phase, and this is a learning that we had from our initial days. In the initial days, we thought if we found a very interesting team, anyone in our global offices would say, oh, that's a great solution. It will solve me a problem on the ground. And what we realize sometimes that when we, let's say, sometimes you fall in love with a certain startup, it happens. Yeah. You're really excited about them, but then you realize you go to your global offices and say, hey, would you be interested to test this solution? And they say, this does not solve a problem for me. So what we did was, afterwards, we realized that we, from the sourcing phase, need to do a matching. So what we do now is, before we even bring a team to a boot camp, one of our 5-day programs that we do in person or in a virtual setting, we actually look at the startups and then match. Is there a business unit in our headquarters that would be interested in this solution? Is there a country office, maybe in Tanzania, maybe in Egypt, maybe in Laos? Would they be interested in that innovation? Yeah. And if we don't find a matching, the team wouldn't be invited to our program, because our impact is through our field access. So we have to have a match and a demand for the solution. So it doesn't stay at that idea stage that we discussed before. So for us, it's from the sourcing phase. And then also during the boot camp, we actually also bring now the startup team. I'm just using a startup as an example. We'll bring the startup and the colleagues from that specific country office to check, is there actual match? So we go from the paper, like ideas and conversations, to actual conversations, going with them on, let's understand together, what is the user that you envision? What is the user that the country office envisioned? Are we speaking about the same user? Do we have the same, let's say, vision in terms of a potential pilot together? So the impact is actually defined from an early stage. And that was a learning from us, that both teams are critical. The startup team is critical for our success and the solution they provide, and also the match to our country office.
Okay. And this happens in the boot camp, during the boot camp?
So the sourcing happens before. So we get, I can tell you to date, we've had more than 6,000 applications to our program.
Wow.
We've run more than 30 innovation boot camps in person and virtually since March. And we've funded more than 80 sprint projects, which we give $100,000 to teams, and also give them mentoring and access to our field locations. Right. So these numbers also include, I should mention, we started with running only the WFP Innovation Program. We've now expanded to support the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in some of their innovation work, UNFPA, and a program called Humanitarian Grand Challenge. So so we've expanded, also realizing that we can support the Sustainable Development Goals and the innovation work not only for ourselves but also for other entities. And we've taken all these learnings from each of our programs and cross-pollinated them.
Okay. So what happens during this bootcamp that you mentioned, this 5-day bootcamp?
So the bootcamp, so in the past, we would fly in to Munich, but we've also done it in other locations. We run a bootcamp in San Francisco and one in Dar es Salaam. The bootcamps is a 5-day program. And I like to mention the 5 days because we tested 3 days a version and a 10-day version. And we realized that the 5 days for our needs is the optimal amount of days. And what we do is we really go through a human-centered design journey while looking at the business model, while bringing, and we just go over 5 days, different elements of key elements that we find as the most important for a project to succeed. And so we do the user journey, we check the assessments, the assumptions of the team, because I think many times you assume things about the user, but when we bring our colleagues from the country office, they can give insight. What is the needs of a mother in this in that reality? What are the needs of farmers in that reality? So depending on who's your, we have a deep dive into who is the user. We look into the business model. We look into we help teams work on their pitch, because I think pitches are such a strong tool, not only for innovation activities, but it's really a strong communication tool. So we work with the teams to hone their pitches, because we also run a pitch event. So after the bootcamp. So it's a 5-day program, very busy, with a lot of also pollination between the different teams that come to our program. We usually have between 8 and 12 teams per bootcamp.
Okay. And during this bootcamp, do they meet their, I guess, stakeholders? The startups meet their stakeholders, or their, I guess, champion office?
So yeah, so we try to, in our program, when we run it for the World Food Program, yes, we bring in, we try to bring in the country office to be involved. Well, we run the program ourselves, but we also rely on a lot of mentorship. We want to bring them, it could be experts from WFP about nutrition, or about logistics in different locations. And that is, knowledge that is not easily accessible. Even if you Google it, it's not the same as talking to someone with the actual experiences about these topics. On the other side, it's also very important for us to bring experts from the private sector. So we've worked with different innovation programs like Google Launchpad, and they've brought us their private sector, let's say, mentors, like mentors on marketing or on UX UI. So we really want to give, let's say, a rounded mentorship to teams. We provided during the bootcamp, and we also give mentorship after the bootcamp as well to the teams that we fund. So it's we try to make the 5 days as robust as possible. So even if a team doesn't get funded by us, they do get value from those 5 days. Yeah,
that's incredible. I mean, the 5-day bootcamp does sound like, I'm thinking about my own bootcamp, in the Israeli military. It does sound very close to that. Do they get to sleep, or is it sleep?
Yes, it's important. People need to be well rested. Yeah.
Good. So I want to ask you about commitment. Okay, because you mentioned matchmaking many times, and like in any relationship, things might not work out, and the relationship, you break up essentially. How do you so I'm assuming that the startup and the country office, they have to commit upfront. Like if the match is good, there's a good fit, they have to commit. What do they commit to, and how do you, if you can, ensure that that commitment holds?
So I think in our case, in most cases, the commitments work out, and it's just we work with certain country. We as an accelerator work with our country office to help plan the pilot, enable all the internal processes that we need to do in order to facilitate the pilot on the ground, the transfer of funds to the startups. The accelerator has a very active role in that. Yet there's also realities that we operate in, and WP operates in many emergency locations. So suddenly, priorities can change. For example, if there's a country that suddenly has an influx of refugees, then, they have to focus on that emergency, and then maybe the timing for the pilot will get postponed, or it will get canceled. And, I think that's part of the reality when you work with an organization like ours, is that's part of like our daily realities. And, and there's other reasons, right, that things don't work out. Sometimes by the time, we want to go into the sprint program, the startup itself has internal changes, or they want to focus on something else. So I think we try to have a very strong commitment, but also there's reality that comes into the picture sometimes.
Right, and you're flexible enough to kind of work around these things if they arise, I guess.
I think in WP you're quite used to it. So yeah.
That's great. We started talking about impact, but we kind of went off track. I want to get us back on track before we wrap up. How do you measure impact in the accelerator? And maybe you could share a story that will kind of help us understand what that impact looks like. Sure.
So impact for us, in our realm of work, there's a term that we use that's called monitoring and evaluation. And it's just a way that you measure things to see, okay, we had certain plans. What are the actions that we will take, and what are the certain outcomes that we expect based on those actions that we thought about? We have a monitoring and evaluation framework that helps us measure, that helps us define, okay, what is success for the structure as an accelerator? So we measure like how many, it's not only about the amount of bootcamps that we've run or the amount of sprints we've run, but what was the quality? What was the satisfaction rate of the participants? We do all surveys, we always continuously want to learn about how the work we've done. But we also measure the impact of the projects that we support on the ground. And it depends on the phase. For us, let's say after the bootcamp, there's the sprint phase. In that phase, you really are focusing on what are the learnings that we can capture of a startup working with smallholder farmers. So you're focusing on the actual learnings from a pilot. You understand that through a initial stage pilot, you won't get to 100,000 people directly. You aspire to that, but you also want to help the startup in their learning journey, and also for WP in its learning journey of working with a new service or technology. In the scaling phase, which is something we created a more detailed focus more recently, that is where you really look at, you go deeper into the numbers of actually, you look at the lives you've impacted already in the sprint phase, but in the scale-up phase, it's much more intentful in the sense that you expect larger numbers. Okay. So one project, I can mention two projects that we have in our scale-up program right now. The first project is called H2Grow, and it's related to using a technology called hydroponics. Is when you grow food without soil. You just need, you actually need less water for it, and you need nutrients. And it's very effective to use in arid areas. And it's not a technology that we created. It's existing for many years. What we brought into it is, let's say, introducing hydroponics and making it fit local needs in different locations around the world. We started this pilot in Peru, where it was focused more on women and created an additional income for women in the urban slums of Peru. We then moved on to the quite like different area. We moved to a refugee camp in Algeria, where you have the Sawari refugees, and there we actually started with a very high-tech solution. We brought these old shipping containers with LED lighting that cost around $40,000, and it was very complex to bring these old shipping containers into the desert. And we realized that it wasn't scalable. So actually with a local team member, with Taleb, who we actually he was able to recreate, let's say, the system with locally available materials.
Wow.
And that cost us, it was 10% of the cost of the same system, maybe a bit less results, of course, but the system itself cost us $3,000 or $4,000. And it got similar, let's say, if you created it, created some number of those systems, you could create similar results. And we tested, does it need to have plastic covering? Should it be in a mud hut? And then with H2Grow right now, the goal is that, and it's already doing this, it's already scaling. I think we're at 9 or 10 countries around the world, including Kenya and Namibia, Jordan. And the idea, every time we go to the community and we understand, okay, you want to grow food locally, but is it for human consumption? Is it for your livestock? Because that is your biggest asset. And by having healthier livestock, you create more of an income for you and it sustains your family. So I think that's, we look at impact, at what is the impact for the direct people who use our systems, and also the let's say, is there any ripple effect on others as well. The second project I wanted to mention is building blocks. This is much more techie, let's say, innovation, and it's based on blockchain. And there again, we started with a very basic assumption. This was actually a team that was in our 10-day bootcamp, our only one that we ever did 10 days. I actually worked there with one of my colleagues, Human Haddad. And at the time, he was a finance officer, and he really understood how money works within our large organization and how it reaches the pocket of a WFP beneficiary. And at the time, blockchain was a new topic. This was probably 4 years ago. And he knew how finance works with WFP. And then his goal was to understand how would blockchain translate to WFP. And again, we started with a tiny pilot with 100 people he came to the boot camp, and we went to a pilot with 100 people in Pakistan just to see would a transaction work. Then we went to Jordan, and first pilot was with 10,000 refugees, expanded to 100,000 refugees. And right now, Building Blocks is expanding to other locations, to one of the biggest refugee camps in the world, in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. And we've reached, where the numbers are rising. I think we're at 3,000 or 400,000 people using that system and improving their lives, using a new way to give cash to our people we help using blockchain technology. So I think the impact you measure in different ways, depending on the stage of the innovation.
I'm blown away. I just want to recap a couple of things that you said that I think were key here. Is one, you're using existing technologies. It's not about developing new cutting edge technologies. It's about using or maybe reusing these technologies in different areas for different issues, challenges, problems, whatever. Also, you're focusing on good enough solutions, which sort of like on a local minimum seem inefficient or not good as. But when you take it up a notch, right, when you look at sort of like the local maximum, create a much bigger impact, which I think is an incredible approach. Or I guess the combination of the two things is an incredible approach. So good for you. That's wonderful. My humble part in all of this is like, how do we tell more people about what you do? So maybe could you share your website, ongoing challenges? How can listeners get involved with what you guys are doing?
Sure. So it depends which platform you prefer. So on Twitter, you can find us on @WFP Innovation. If you like to see things on your LinkedIn feed, so you can follow WFP Innovation Accelerator. And if you just like to check out our websites, it's innovation.wfp.org. And if you want to apply, you can there's a /apply on our website. And we really try to share on our platforms, not only the activities that we're doing, but also our learnings. I think this is something, in the beginning, we were so busy doing, and now we're realizing that we need to communicate our work more and more. And the learnings, I think it's not about the project, but what did we learn by running this specific project? So that's the type of information you can find on our different platforms.
That's amazing. And how can people maybe get in touch with you if they wanted to connect or ask questions or things like that?
Sure. You can reach out to me. My email is Hila, HILA.COHEN @WFP.org.
Cool. So I'm going to put all of that in the show notes so people don't have to memorize it or anything like that. Hila, thank you so much for being on the School of Innovation.
Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.